Excellent. All right, let's get started, everyone. Welcome. We're at 12:01, June 23rd. This is the fourth and final in this webinar series on cybersecurity for municipal government. And we're going to end with our most evolved, more advanced phase today. We're going to dive in. There's a lot of elements to it. Joining me today, you'll hear from David Kaiser. David, you want to introduce yourself for those that may have not been on before?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Kaiser, as mentioned, and I am the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Vermont.
Thank you, David. And then from a vendor that you may have already interacted with, at least via email, Kerwin Gaines. Kerwin, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Kerwin Gaines. I am working with the state of Vermont in the SLCGP program. Happy to meet all of you.
Excellent. All right. So again, we're starting on phase 3. This is kind of the third and the more advanced of the phases that we've identified as a roadmap that moves. This can be applicable to any organization, but is focused on local government, right? And even subsets of government. This is one thing I haven't spoken about in the past, but not all municipalities may end up moving, or may not, I want to say this, not all of a municipality, depending on its size, may move through these phases at the same rate. One of the things that I was thinking about was context is that for the last few years, there has been a heavy focus, drive, push for water and wastewater systems to address their resiliency from a cyber perspective, because there has been some very prominent known vulnerabilities that are in that space. And so, as you think about these, depending on the size of your organization, right, depending on the size of your municipality, and the different services and responsibilities you have, there may be an opportunity to apply these at a different rate, right? So maybe the department that handles infrastructure, water and wastewater, if you have those responsibilities, may be appropriate to go ahead of, say, tax assessors, those that manage the grand list or something, right? There's different, it doesn't have to be across the board. So just wanted to say that, because not all areas are at equal risk. Depending, and as the organization gets bigger, may be more appropriate to think about it in different pieces. So phase 3 is where we start to get into being, it says active defense, but it's really about proactive, right? I feel like this is where you start to move from being building out your perimeter and kind of hunkering down within it, right? That's what's been the progression up to this point, to actually looking at things that are helping you stay ahead. So it's not just like build it and withstand, but it's like things like using active threat intelligence to inform you of the current risks that maybe others are seeing in your sector or your area of responsibility.
Do you want to go back, or I'm sorry?
No. As soon as I say time to move on.
Okay.
How phase 3 builds on earlier work, right? So this phase is really about detection, response, and recovery. So we're looking at phase 1 was, let's get the fundamentals, the foundation in place. We did an asset inventory, we established policies, and we designated someone that's going to be just the part cheerleader, part taskmaster. Doesn't have to be a technical person, right? But they're the cyber lead, so it's in their responsibility. It's one of the hats they have to wear. Phase 2 built upon that, right? And we're reducing the common stuff. This was implementing multi-factor authentication, right? This is what else was in that area? Perimeter security, so ensuring you have firewalls and stuff. Vulnerability management, making sure you're patching and updating your systems in a reasonable period of time, and I am missing one. But and so this one builds upon those. Oh, .gov migration. So that was the other one in that space. David, anything to add?
Not yet.
All right, Kerwin, yourself.
No, I think it's good, and just use this as a template. Even so, you don't say you're not interested in SLCGP or you want to move on, but use these phases as a template to building those pillars within your municipality. So a roadmap, so to speak, and ensuring that you're covering all your ends. That's all.
Yep. And details of each of these phases have been coming out as part of the thank you email, I believe. But when we're all said and done with this series, I just heard back from the comms people that the first two webinars have been uploaded to YouTube. So we will add links to those on the ready.vermont.gov website under SLCGP. We're also going to add the pillars documentation. We may add the decks. There's been a handout on the SLCGP. So a lot of the information that either we've talked about or have been supporting to what we've been talking about over the last few weeks, we will make available on that website over the next few days. So encourage you to check it out periodically. Phase 3 includes endpoint detection and response. This is the next level of making sure that those devices on your network are minimizing the risk. Verified backups. Put the word verified in there for a reason. Backups are important, but ensuring that you can recover from them are really important. That's what makes the difference between whether or not you're thinking about having to pay the ransom or not. Security awareness training. No matter what we do for technical things to try and firm up our defenses, to try and make our organizations more resilient, just as importantly is to ensure that individuals have proper training so that they know when that Nigerian prince reaches out that they're not really being asked to go buy $10,000 in Amazon gift cards and send them somewhere, right? That's important stuff. The people are still a critical piece of a resilient environment because it's not just the technology, it's the tech and the people working together. An incident response plan. So the incident response plan is that break glass moment when you start to have even just an inkling that something may be amiss. Much like an emergency response plan, these things, when we are in the throes of an event, regardless of what type of event, having something to follow helps keep everybody organized on track, helps to organize your communications, those types of things, all those elements. So that's an incident response plan. We're going to get deeper into these. And then active threat intelligence. One of the ones that I mentioned earlier was how do you start monitoring not looking at risk as being static, but staying abreast of those risks that are constantly new, evolving, changing, popping up. And it may not be within your warehouse, but having either a vendor or managed service provider or someone on staff that's just being aware of that will be helpful. There is one missing here or I should say that when you see the pillars document, we have expanded it. So this work was developed before that. And that is third-party risk management. What's that mean? When you look at all of the things that we've been talking about for the first 3 weeks and what we're going to talk about today, that relates to your house, right? Your organization, your environment, and how to make it more resilient from a cyber perspective. What you don't want to do is turn around and undo all of that great work by entering into agreements with contractors that aren't as diligent, right? So third-party risk management is how do you start thinking about those that you have contractual relationships with, ensuring that they are not bringing risk to you. That's a simple way to look at it. So, and that'll be in the expanded version that'll be available down the road. David?
Yeah, don't think of these as overwhelming in their individual tasks, right? It's a collection of processes. There are guidelines out there that you can step through. And because of the scale you're working with, the responses aren't going to be nearly as in depth as what larger organizations have to deal with. So I see these as guidelines for you to have a structured process to think through the issues. Not necessarily that you have to make a 20-point strategic plan that involves all. What are the total 10 of these areas?
13 with third-party
13.
security.
Yeah. All right. So I'm not saying don't take them based on the way we're talking about them and use them in a formal way, because I think there's value there too. But the process of being exposed to these areas and thinking about them in and of itself starts you down the path of getting more maturity in this space.
Good, very good point. Very good point. Carwin, anything to add from your perspective?
The endpoint detection and response is one of the major purchases throughout the United States within SLCGP, right? So if you want to know what other states are purchasing more than anything, it's going to be endpoint detection and response, right? So had a great conversation with Texas earlier this week, yesterday, and they are working on that and how to distribute that throughout their environment, right? And so, well, Kerwin, what the heck is that? Right? Well, I don't understand what the importance is, and Dave could speak to it as well. Is that, hey, what we're doing, what they want to do is stop and notify whomever within your community, within who's running your network, that something is happening. There's a miss somewhere, right? There's a notification that there is a problem and someone's trying to enter your network. Now, how do we go ahead and do that, right? How do we go ahead and respond to that? But they're notifying you, right? So that's very, very important, because things happen, especially even in small towns, because this can be scaled. Like, how do we do that effectively? So I think it's great to have. I hope that you look into it, and the verified backups. And Sean gave a great explanation of what an immutable backup is and how important that is, especially when you're dealing with ransom. How can we make that better, right? So how can we bring those files back so we don't have to pay the ransom? So we are in control of our data. So I think they're both very, very important to the project. Sorry to belabor the point.
No, that's all valid points. And as we'll talk about as we go through these, we have projects identified in our, I don't know how to characterize it, pending approval cybersecurity plan for the state and local cybersecurity grant program that's with FEMA that addresses all of these, right? So that's the important thing, is when we talk about all of these elements, we're not just saying that, hey, you got to figure out how to go do something. We have vendors already under a retainer contract with the state of Vermont and working on getting the funding by adding these projects to the state and local cybersecurity grant program. And this is new since our last webinar last week, we were able to get a 1-year extension on our federal fiscal year 2022 projects in the SLCGP. And what does that mean? What that means is there was supposed to be a 10% match. So the federal grant was going to pay for 90% of any project, and there was supposed to be a 10% match. The state of Vermont was granted a waiver in year 1. So 100% of the costs can be covered by the grant program. That waiver has been, that extension has been approved with that waiver. So now, instead of us like running up against the clock and having to complete work using those funds by, can't remember what it was, like October or November of this year. So
Yeah,
they'll be
last
done
week
by
in October or
December.
something like that. Yeah.
Yep. Now we have almost all of calendar year 27 to utilize that pot of money at zero match. So keep that in mind. You're the first ones to kind of hear it here. And that will be beneficial when we get our updated cybersecurity plan to be able to allow us to find vendors to come in and help you work through a lot of these things that are next on the priorities for you. Let's move ahead. Let's talk about some detail on some of these, although we've been talking a little bit of detail. So endpoint detection and response. Endpoint detection is those tools that are sitting on a computer, on a server, on network attached devices that are looking to detect suspicious activity, right? So whether that's services that are running that don't normally, whether it's a file being accessed that doesn't normally get accessed, it's just looking for anomalies. When we pair that with response, right, those services go the next step and they are given some, I guess I would say, authority, right, on those devices to do something to at least stop that activity, whether it's to quarantine it, whether it's to isolate it in some way, or to actually fix it if it's something that's the behavior is recognized as a known pattern and they can remediate it. So that's kind of endpoint detection, and then with response kind of paired with it. Often, when you do these through cloud services, you get these 24/7, right? So, which that means is that if, right, your water system, your drinking water system obviously has to be on 24/7 because people need water as much at 2 a.m. as they do at 2 p.m. You don't just shut down the computers and stuff. So even though there may not be somebody there, there's somebody looking out for your hardware, looking out at your endpoints and monitoring them on your behalf around the clock. The real important piece of this, right, is that when something's detected, it's not until the next time, if it happens at 2 a.m. Saturday morning, doesn't go until Monday before something is done about it. So that's one of the important elements of this type of service. David.
Yes, sir.
Thoughts you have?
The second bullet kind of talks about where this evolved from, right? The idea that they took the model that an antivirus program used and expanded it out to look for a broader array of threats to the system, and then added a auto response where appropriate and a contain quarantine function as an additional technique that you can use to isolate the threat until somebody can take a look at it and figure out what's going on. So as with a lot of technology, it's an evolution of a previous model with better execution and usually an increased speed and response. And it's a foundational part of what we do. That's probably the first thing that we look at. So it's definitely something to consider if you don't have it in place already.
Yeah.
I would consider it a very solid start to how you go through this journey.
Yep. It is an important one. Kerwin.
Sure. So the good news about endpoint detection and response, and when you bring these vendors, right? So there are some major vendors out there that can help you, and it's the service offering is very scalable. All right, and I'm sure Sean and Dave can talk to you about it, because with that scalability comes a little bit of different cost, right? And when you're dealing with EDR vendors. But the good news is, for a small municipality like yourself, when you get that call at 2 o'clock in the morning, or whenever that call comes, it's rarely convenient. You're not forced to have a solution, right? A lot of these have the option to say, hey, look, there's the problem. We can also go out and fix that problem, right? So with a small municipality, you don't have a help desk, you don't have a security operations center. And that is what these vendors are trying to help these small municipalities become, right? They're saying, hey, look, we can be your 24/7 security operations center, or your IT department that can go out and help with remediation and make these things happen, right? So they're taking, especially from you all that are the administrators of your town, it's taking that stress off of you, and allowing somebody else to fix it. And it's giving, and it's showing that you're doing your due diligence in order to resolve those issues.
Erwin, the truism on my team is that it always hits at 4:30 on a Friday.
It always hits, right. I haven't met one convenient yet. I haven't met one. But that is, you're going to want someone on your side. So we're just not giving you the solutions, but we're, when future rounds come through and these projects or products are available, you're just not getting that. You can scale it to make sure that, hey, are you guys going to fix this too? So they're great. I recommend highly that you look into this. I can't recommend vendors or anything like that, but I can say that I think it's very, very important. We had a question there in the chat. Sean?
Yeah. Helen, and I apologize if I know I won't get this right. Krasinski? Yeah.
Did far better than I would have done.
I won't even attempt any farther. My apologies. What questions do I ask our remote IT team to find out how they detected a recent breach? They did state that we do have 24/7 detection. They would like us to purchase that additional coverage. It said we do not have 24/7 detection. They would like us. Sorry, I thought it said do have. That's an interesting one. What questions do I ask?
I think we need a little more detail on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're on the right track. I'll say that,
Yeah.
right?
I think the assessment process would go a long way towards helping figure that out.
I think it would, but I also think that there is an opportunity there, right, to ask that remote IT team to how do I want to say this? Put together a proposal that not only talks about pricing, right, but monitoring, benefits gained. I think let them put forth something that gets into the details, because they're going to be knowledgeable of your environment. They're going to be knowledgeable of what you have now. So like what the evolution of this will give you, because I think it's cautious. I think you're going to do due diligence, right, to ensure that it's not just I don't want to say it, upselling for the sake of that versus actually getting benefit. So I would want something that's a significant proposal. And then while you're working through that, maybe that's something as we go through if you want to do the assessment with us, that's something that we can talk about as part of doing that assessment is what are they proposing and how does that match up with what we're seeing as far as risk for you. So I think all too often I'm going to make some generalization here, and it's not always this case, but sometimes I think the tech people just are like, oh, trust me, this is what you need to do. And I think the onus needs to be to put it as like a proposal that really identifies where you are, where this gets you to, so that you can see the value of going from where you are to, say, a 24/7 service. That would be my thoughts as a next steps for you.
I think one other thing you can talk to them about is what does this help you avoid, right? They should have case studies that show you where equivalent entities have put things in place and avoided a certain amount of time, labor, expense, legal exposure, and then you can bounce that off of something as simple as Google Gemini to see if what they're stating is verified by a second opinion, say, right? And that's a fairly easy process to go through.
Good point. Anything else, Kerwin?
No, I think that it's good. I don't. There's other services that you can have that run 24/7, right? Even though this is endpoint detection and it's really really good to have. There is several other products that can enhance that, right? So this is the bottom level, right? The foundational type things, but you can do so many other things to increase that depending on time and budget and the amount of scrutiny that you're under. But having something like this, and I don't want to open up Pandora's box in the middle of Sean's presentation, but if you're processing payments online, right? So your gas, water, light, or what have you, there are products that can help you with that if they feel that there is a breach. So keep that in mind as well. That's all I have.
Yep. Let's move on. We're getting into maturity levels on this one. So one of the things that you'll see in the deeper dive document is that while we've identified these 13 areas and kind of presented them in this progression that goes from maturity, working from the beginning to in each one of them, there's also a maturity within each one of those areas, each one of those pillars. And so because you can be doing something, but it may be just the basics, and that is not how do I want to say it? Maybe the next level up is the appropriate level of robustness for your organization to be truly doing it appropriately. So, and this is one of those things where it's like, we're offering these levels so that people can kind of get an idea of where they are, like a little bit of a self-assessment. And we would argue that if you could get to level 2 across all of them, you would be you're going to be sound, right? That level 2 is a good, solid base across all of the different pillars. And so here's for endpoint detection and response, right? We talk about level 1 is basic protection, but with limited follow-up monitoring. So this is like maybe you implement Windows Defender on your PCs, but you're not necessarily monitoring them. You're just kind of letting Windows Defender do its thing. And the next time you come into the office, it may tell you Windows Defender did this on your behalf or did that. Level 2 has a little bit stronger monitoring, and so the monitoring is coming back to like either a service provider or your tech team, right? And they're reviewing it and kind of monitoring and may take active measures depending on what they find. And then level 3 is that more robust or mature one, like we were talking about, where there are cloud vendors that you can sign up for 24/7, and they're going to have people monitoring alerts on your system, and you can even give them authority to resolve certain types of issues or events on your behalf.
I think we had a question from Miss Lestat. She was saying, how do we...
I see that.
Yeah.
It's a great question, right? So Jennifer Lestat, how do we trust the company that offers endpoint detection? How would I know a good company from a company is a bad actor? That is wonderful question. Because we have seen, right? I mean, if you're not in the tech space, you don't know who is appropriate. This is one where it's like often you can just crowdsource it, right? I mean, you can ask that question of Google. You can ask your peers. So, or like through, say, somebody like the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, is it appropriate to say, hey, you know, is anybody else using this? Do they come with any kind of endorsement? You can ask the state. I would say, I'm gonna pick on my parents. They're still alive, and they are in their late 80s. And my rule of thumb is, like, if somebody either comes to you, emails you, or calls you, and they're offering you something that sounds really good and it's unsolicited, probably walk away. So, Jennifer, typically the more mature organizations are likely not going to reach out to you. They are large, they're well established, so it's usually going to require you to make contact with them. That's one of the, like, fundamentals to me, right? If it's unsolicited, you start from a position of being skeptical. David, what are your thoughts on her questions there?
Well, for technologies, they're pretty established players, right? The resellers is the question in my mind on how you figure out whether they're value add or just taking a piece and not really doing anything to help you out. So you can type in endpoint detection and response or EDR technology providers, like Sean was saying, into any significant search engine and get a good response on what technologies are available. But I think that where the league comes in, or talking to your peers comes in, is about the local resellers and who's been easy to work with and who is difficult. It parses that out a little more specifically, right?
I think the best part about this webinar and the program is, okay, up until maybe 3 months ago, you may not have known who the deputy CISO was for the state of Vermont, or the former CIO of the state of Vermont, or SLCGP. Now you have all of those connections, which I hope that you leverage for some type of advice. Well, we can't help you select a vendor per se, but we can tell, they would be more than happy to tell you, I know I would, about in the space what has been proven successful, right? I think, Sean, you brought up a good point, or was it David? I'm not sure, where it's like, well, what is the state using? You're not making a recommendation. You're just saying, hey, this is what the state has used, right? Some other states that deal in SLCGP will bulk buy those actual ERPs. So you're taking the question out, which I think is a part of your question is, well, how do I know which one, right? Which one is the best? So a lot of times you get into Coke or Pepsi, right? They both do the same thing, a little different flavor in how they do it, but they're both reputable companies, and you know that the soda that's in the bottle was made at a certain particular plant under certain standards, and you're going to be okay if you drink it. So some of those are there. But the other rule of thumb that my parents, well, especially my father, used to say is, you get what you pay for, right? So if they're promising you the world for $9, they're probably not going to be the product of choice, of recommendation. But keep that in mind. Leverage your resources that you currently have now. Keep them in mind when you're making these, and we're here to help you to the best of our ability. That we're not hamstrung in providing answers, but we're definitely here to help you. So leverage the program.
All good points. Let's slide forward. All right. Verified backups. Backups are good. Tested backups are what really matters, right? I mean, that is the there are rules, things like having them, so they can't be altered. We call it immutable, right? But it's to be assured that the backup can't be altered. You should have them stored in multiple geographic places, right? There are these rules to having a sound disaster recovery program approach. But really what it boils down to is, you got to test them, and you got to test them frequently to ensure that you can restore like you think you can. And that's an important part of it. And that's what this one's really all about, is how do we have an SLCGP project that has, well, actually we have a couple. One that starts with engaging with you to help figure out what your needs are for like recovery and stuff like that, and helps design a right-sized approach for disaster recovery for you. And then the other one is to help you implement it, right? Are you going to use cloud storage? Are you going to use, a couple of on-site or a couple of facilities that you know of, those types of things. So, and figure out how to do a routine. And when I say routine, it doesn't have to be like weekly or something, but you've got to at least have some sort of cadence by which you are validating your backups that you can restore from them. Because the other thing is that your environment does not stand still. Something's always changing. And I'm not talking just that there's new Word files getting backed up in a file share, but configurations change, new computers come online, old ones drop off. Those backup, those restore attempts also help you make sure that you're not missing out on something, right? That a new device was added and it's not included in any backup anywhere, or those types of things. So they're an important validation process. David, any thoughts on the backups? If you're talking, you're on mute.
Sorry, I've got stuff going on outside my office, so I muted myself. To go back do multiple generations or iterations of backups, because you want to go back, rule of thumb, maybe 6 months. There are some clever bad actors who get on your network and just wait a while to make sure that their tools are in place so they can encrypt even off of a backup that's fairly fresh. So you may have to go back a while to get to a clean backup that doesn't have their tool set on your system anymore. So that's a really annoying and clever tactic. And like I said, go back a while, have multiple generations.
Multiple generations. I love how that sounds. I do. I want to use it. I want to steal it and say that I made it up. So if we've lost some of you in this and why this is important, this is how ransomware happens, right? So they'll go in and they'll say, we have all of your data, pay us to get it back. Well, if you have these immutable backups that are multi-generational with all of that are clean, right? So it's okay to have a backup, but if they've embedded code in those backups, so when you restore, they're coming right back again, to David's point, then this is all for naught. But if you have them and they're clean and they're stored, you can tell that ransom person to pack sand, basically. Don't worry, yeah, because you're going to restore from a place that's clean, right? So this is great ransomware prevention. If that is the type of ransom or what they are threatening to hold ransom, right? There's so many other things, but this is primary, the big one. And that's why so many other states within SLCGP are making this one of their staples that they purchase for their municipalities, or assist with their municipalities. So this is a great prevention. I know some of you may be wondering or worrying about that. Oh, if we're struck with ransomware, how much money do we have for ransom, and so on and so forth. But this is just great. I can't speak enough about it and how important that it is. I think it's a great benefit that will be offered in other fiscal years here for the state of Vermont, and I strongly urge that you take advantage of it.
Good points. Let's move along. So again, we've offered the maturity levels, which is, basic, doing backups on devices, but follow-up is limited, right? And then level 2 is you're testing them on a regular basis, and you understand recovery, and you have prioritization for that kind of stuff. And then level 3, backup and recovery practices are tested, reliable, and tied to clear recovery goals and responsibilities. So when, as a local government, right, you have responsibility of services that you provide your citizens, just like the state has services we provide our citizens. And when you start talking I don't want to say it, the escalation, I guess, of the verified backups is really getting to a continuity of operations, right? So every organization that has an obligation to its citizens to provide services really should have some sort of continuity of operations plan, right? So when something happens and the organization is really adversely impacted, how do you continue to provide services that the citizens rely upon consistently? And some of those are going to be physical threats, some of those are going to be natural disaster threats, and some of those are going to be cyber threats. And so that level 3 maturity is really when you're understanding that relationship between both your technology and your processes, your services, and your people, and how they all come together to ensure minimizing disruption in any kind of an event. Anything to add, David or Kerwin?
No, I think you're right on.
I see David not off mute, so I'm going to take that as nothing to add. All right.
Yeah, as usual. Anyway, same as Kerwin.
Okay. Security awareness training. We talked about this quite a bit when we were going through the introduction, right? But this is where folks learn over time how to inspect stuff that comes in, like say via email. But now, I mean, it's coming via texting, right? I don't know how many folks here, maybe some of you, have received those wonderful text messages saying that, if you don't reach out in the next, I don't know, 3 days, you're going to have your license revoked because you didn't pay a toll 120 days ago, in theory, somewhere where you were driving. Right?
They got me. I'm embarrassed. This is my vocation, and they did a really good scam, and that it wasn't that long ago. It was maybe 3 months ago. It was really, really good, and I'm embarrassed they got me. So yeah.
And the programs are, I joke about the Nigerian prince, right? I mean, that's how it originally started back, I don't know, 20 years ago in email, right? You'd get the email, hey, I need to hide $10 million. Give me your, bank account information. I will go ahead and transfer it, and you can help me out type thing, right? And which, those seem like almost as a joke nowadays, but then the sophistication has gotten tremendous. And this is where not a one and done approach, and I'd like David to talk about the state's approach when it comes to security awareness training, but this is where a continuous program helps to keep it in top of mind for employees so that you reduce the risk. You're never going to get rid of it, but you help educate to the point where you're reducing the risk. David, you want to talk about the states?
Well, before I go there, I'm going to, I guess, put a pet peeve out there. One of the most annoying parts of the growth of AI is the ability for phishing emails to become harder and harder to distinguish from a good email that comes from somebody right? Because the bad actor can basically put a template together, feed the AI the template and the target audience, and come up with customized emails for each of the individuals involved. So it becomes more than just a badly spelled email that is creating a urgency environment trying to get you to click on a link. It becomes something from someone on a topic you're used to working around, and those, what I will call social engineering via AI, I guess, pieces become harder and harder to think through. So a lot of, especially if somebody's coming along and doing what we call business email compromise, where they're trying to get into your vendor payment stream and spoof something there, always do a second and third means of communication to verify that those kinds of things are coming at you accurately. If it's unexpected, if it's out of cycle, if it's something you haven't seen before, especially then. As far as the way the state trains, we do a couple of 10 to 15 minute modules per quarter for our folks covering things like phishing, like social media campaigns, safe behaviors in social media, dealing with different topics from ransomware, like we've talked about, to what you can or can't install on your system by yourself versus having to have admin privileges, those kinds of things. And we basically pay a contractor to do customized AI-based training for topics that pop up, so we can do a quick turn on something that showed up recently. It's been fairly successful. Everybody's supposed to take it. We get take rates between 70 and 95%, depending on which area of the state we're talking about. So we're still working on getting complete training to everyone on time in the way we want it to happen. But one of the things that's really fun for my team, at least, is we run security phishing campaigns, right? Where we will fish internally to see who bites, and then provide a little updated training to folks that do bite on things that the security team sent out. So my team probably enjoys that a little more than they should, but that is also a good way to emphasize what's going on and work on more current tactics so that people see what's out there based on what we're seeing in the security community.
I think you guys ought to do a Kerwin campaign.
Yeah, you'd be entertained, I'll tell you. The level of frustration and embarrassment that I had with my recent one, so they used Easy Pass, and I live in the tri-state area, so it's to get an Easy Pass violation in my home is because they all come out of my account. There's a trial. All right. So the fact that I got one was really bad. And I'm like, oh man, I went through the toll. So they geolocated me to know that I was on 95, to understand that, okay, there's a high probability that, okay, he's in the state of New Jersey. This is what it is. And they hit me saying, hey, you just went through the toll and you didn't pay. I'm like, daggone it, I paid. I stopped. I saw the thing. They're like, no, you need to pay. You need to verify right now. Click on the thing, and they had the whole site that looked just like Easy Pass, but I was driving, so I couldn't look at the URL to see what it was, and they got me. And I didn't feel bad because it was on the news like a couple nights later saying that there was this massive, whatever. But the heckling has yet to stop within my small community that I fell for it. But, you're looking at it on your phone, you're seeing it on the app, you're not thinking. So yes, it can happen to you too.
Good point. All right. Again, right, the three maturity levels, you start with something. Level 1 is, right, some sort of occasional awareness. Level 2, the training provided more regularly. Staff have a simple way to report suspicious emails or activity. And then level 3 is, where you're doing routine training, you have reminders, you have little tidbits, and you're doing exercises to try and kind of stress test how effective it is, to see if there are people that are learning from it or not. And, do some people need a little bit of focus training because they're still falling for stuff? But that's an important piece. And one thing that I want to say, and I don't know if I don't want this to sound like a negative, but it is going to come out as a negative. Often we compromise our technical environments for convenience. And a lot of what we have talked about starting 4 weeks ago, right? Whether it's having to stop and confirm, enter the 4 digits texted to you for MFA, or, having to sign in through a VPN to connect when you're remote to a work resource, or having to sit down and spend 10 or 15 minutes every quarter doing security awareness training. They're not, due diligence isn't always convenient, but it's important to recognize that and to figure out to like strike that balance between, you shouldn't just be able to like wiggle your mouse, have your cursor wake your computer up and just get to work, right? I mean, that's something we know is probably not good behavior. So there are some inconvenience that comes with that. I see Jennifer owning up. So we're having folks are with you, Kerwin. You are not alone. So let's move forward. We're down to the last under 10 minutes here. Incident response plan. So this is I like to call it the break glass, right? This is the point by which, you've been doing other things, but something is just acting suspicious. Things are not quite right. You're fearful that there is some sort of cyber event going on. This plan is what you pull out and you start following, because in the heat of the moment, it can be hard to think logically. You get caught up in the emotion, you get caught up in the chaos and excitement of some sort of event going on. And having that incident response plan that helps keep you on a script, helps remind you who needs to be notified, right? Because you've agreed to some sort of communications pattern on stuff. So you don't, you're not having to answer. I'm sure David can speak to this, right? Because I know when I was CIO, if there was any kind of event going on, didn't even have to be cyber, right? I was a pest. And I think, most of the people in leadership roles
No
end up yeah, thank you. End up being that way. It's like you want the information momentarily, and every time you are, as a leader, kind of deviating from what the agreed upon plan is as far as communications and updates, you're distracting the people that can really make a difference from spending time making a difference in whatever that event is. And so even the simple things like having an agreed upon communications plan, right? That the chair of the select board will be notified, every 4 hours, and then sticking to it so that you don't kind of like get off the rails and be and have distractions that are competing against being actually responsive. That's important. The other is that in the last bullet, it's like a good plan is stronger when it has been discussed or practiced. This is, if you do an assessment with us, we'll start asking about things like tabletop exercises. So these are, think about them as sitting around a conference room and going through a simulation to ensure that people understand what their roles and responsibility are, kind of stress test it, make sure people know that what their responsibility is. And so much like verifying your backups, an incident response plan is only as good as it's been exercised to make sure that, one, it doesn't, you identify flaws and address them. And two, you start to build some muscle memory for people in different roles to understand what they are. Because the more you have done something, when things are really chaotic, that's what you fall back on is what you've been trained to do. And so exercising that and building muscle memory is important. What David or Kerwin, care to add?
Yeah, and I bet your guys already have something like this around weather emergencies or major events in town or something along that line, planning as a starting point, right? Think of the cyber piece of that and how that integrates and how maybe that even transitions from cyber as its own independent space to maybe this turns into an emergency response at some point, depending on what that cyber emergency is affecting in town. So having those kinds of transitions thought out, having the folks that would have a piece of this incident response plan sit down and talk it through, like Sean was talking about in the last bullet, is huge in taking the adrenaline out of the reaction. If you've played with the idea, if you have an idea whose job is what, if you know how to talk to each other in that space and time, then you're responding from a plan, and I know I'm making it sound redundant, right? As opposed to creating it on the fly and having all the fear, anger, adrenaline response that comes from dealing with high stress situations. So I highly encourage you, even if it's just a page or two of sitting down and walking through it, but there are templates out there for basic ones for smaller entities. So you can find that again on your favorite search engine of choice.
Yeah. So I to echo that point, absolutely, that's what it is, and especially now we're doing a lot of tabletop exercises for the 250th July 4th event, and we know what to do. And I've heard them talk about, oh, in this event, what do we do here? And getting ambulances and fire and police and event staff all coordinated. But as you're making those, just throw cyber in there too. What are we going to do, right? And that's going to take you down a different path. But those are the conversations that you need to begin to have.
Excellent. Let's move forward, because I think we still have one more and we're almost out of time.
Yeah.
Active threat intelligence. So this is the final one. I'm not going to speak to this quickly, but this is subscribing to things like for this, the state has purchased for, I think, at least a year, for all government organizations to belong to the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, which is, I think that's what it stands for, MSISAC. You can see information about joining that on the ready.vermont.gov, but I joined it recently because, one, they have some really good sound templates that can be used for things like policy development and stuff like that. But two, I wanted to see what their information they're sharing is. And, you get routine emails that are like, hey, this is like the threat of the day. Things to be worried about, things to be concerned. Having something like that is really kind of like that. It's not foundational. It's more like the cherry on the sundae, right? It's like when you are at that point by which you've got all these other pieces in place and now you're monitoring or someone is monitoring the threat landscape on your behalf and making sure your environment is reflects any changes in threats. That's a mature cyber position to be in. Thoughts from David or Kerwin?
No, I think it's great. And there's some great, I would say, tools out there to assist in that too.
Yep.
Great tools.
Yeah. And after you've gone through the process of all 12 of these steps, that last threat intelligence piece, you become a more demanding, smarter, more nuanced consumer of information around this as well, right? And that helps you start customizing what you're doing for your situation and being better at understanding the data that's coming in from whatever your intelligence provider is and whether it applies to your space and activities or not. So that, and I think this graphic kind of hints at that, right? It's a virtuous cycle that starts building on itself after you go through it.
Yeah, right. These are all informed. They interlock. They really help make for a more mature, a stronger organization from a cyber perspective. They add to the layers. Let's move forward. And our plug for the assessment, right? So a lot of this starts with whether you want to get grant funding or just have one of primarily me. I keep seeing emails where Kerwin passes them to me. Sit down with me and do an assessment where we look at your organization. We try to, we ask some basic questions. It's not too in-depth. We're not getting into technical, right? We're not collecting information about details on your environment because we don't want to have a honeypot for the bad actors to come get to understand what risks are out there. But it really helps to kind of understand where you're at maturity wise and then focus on What are some, just from our experience and logical next steps, and which projects within the state and local cybersecurity grant program can assist you in taking those steps? Keeping it practical, right? Like it says, it's about being ready, not being perfect. This is what we're trying to do, is make everybody just a little bit more resilient in the cyberspace, much like we're trying to do, whether it comes to climate change or anything else. We've talked about the SLCGP. What's that?
Yep. I said, we're here to help you.
Yeah, we've talked about it. It's there. Start with the assessment, and then we can start connecting you to the projects and opportunities that are there to improve your cyber posture. Attacks can still happen even when protections are in place. Preparation changes the outcomes, and resiliency depends on people, process, and technology, right? So people is that training, the process is, making sure things like endpoint detection and response, having sound processes, what to do when you do detect something, and then the technology to enable this. So with that, it's been nice. I want to thank everyone. We're a couple minutes after, but I like the questions during, because it's timely to what we're talking about at that moment, and helps hopefully give context, right, when the questions come up. So we appreciate that. But if there are any more questions, I will hang on here for a couple more minutes if folks want to. One of the things that I'm going to put this out there, why folks are thinking and why I have an audience. One of the things I was thinking about, and I'd like to talk to Jennifer about it sometime, since that's my hometown. I am betting most communities in the state of Vermont have some sort of IT professional as a resident. And it'd be interesting to see if there is an opportunity to have some sort of like designated advisor from a community member that can help with some of this stuff. Because, back to I think it was Jennifer's question, right? How do we trust the companies that there are people that in your community can probably help you figure out who is a trustworthy organization to work with, or what what a certain thing means, and how to interpret it and how to respond to it. And so maybe there's an opportunity there, much like comes to mind is like the cemetery commission, right? But I mean, one of those types of roles within community that is formalized and either elected or appointed, that if there's someone or a group of someone's willing to do it, can help bring like advisory services to each community. So something to think about. I am not seeing any questions in the chat. Not seeing any hands raised. So I think we're going to put a pin in it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. For those of you that have joined us all 4 weeks, we appreciate you spending that time. And hopefully you found value in this, and be glad to follow up with anyone and everyone. So thank you.
And thank you for staying on. And it goes to show that we're giving you good information, because you didn't leave and you listened, and you've been active throughout. So thank you very much. We're here to help. You have my information, and I can't thank you enough. Appreciate it.
Have a good rest of your day,
Thanks so
everyone.
much. See you.